And I can remember the first day pulling up there, and you had probably some of the most veteran cops out there at the old substation. I remember pulling up, and the guys just like looking at me like, what is this little whippersnapper gonna show us?
Hey, so glad to have you on lunch break today. I'm here with Mike Harvey, always entertaining, always informed, and I've got a great friend, Shelly Castaneda, with us today. A lot of you probably have seen Shelly in the news a lot because she was a deputy sheriff and worked her way up in the ranks to where she was the third deputy sheriff in charge, right, Shelly?
Third in charge of chief deputy, right?
Yeah, I like it. What a wonderful career. I knew her when she was coming out of high school, coming into the gym arena, and she's been working out for all these years.
So you worked with Donnie?
I've worked with 3 sheriffs.
You worked
yes.
with Mac?
I worked with Mac, Donnie, and Sheriff Sparks.
Okay.
Sparks,
Oh, that's going back a ways. I remember Sparks though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're glad you tuned in. That's kind of interesting, Shelly, because as you talked about it, you work with somebody that's in charge. Did those 3 sheriffs have different styles, personalities that you had to get used to or work with?
Well, I mean, I didn't, before I promoted up a little higher under Mac Wimbush and Donnie Youngblood, I really didn't have a lot of day-to-day contact with the sheriff. He was kind of like the guy in Building A that you never really saw unless you're in trouble for something.
Did you get in trouble?
No, I did not. But yeah, they all had very different personalities, I would say. All good guys, all very committed to the department. So they were all good leaders.
I got to get a chance to know each one of them. So glad you joined us today.
Thanks for having me.
There again, as Mike is the youngest one at the table. So you've retired.
Yes.
What does that mean for Shelly Castaneda? I mean, what does retirement look like in your life? I know I see you at the gym, and that hasn't changed.
Well, retirement has been hard, and actually I did 28 years with the sheriff's office. And then I lasted a whole year, and then I was bored to death. So I went back to work, actually worked at Bakersfield College in charge of their security department for about 2 years, and then I just retired again this last summer.
So you retired twice?
Twice,
in
yes.
Your
And
young
I think
life.
I'm retired this time now. I think it's time.
You're done. Time to go
but
play.
It's definitely a transition. It really is a transition.
Well, as you're saying, it's a transition. What was it? Was it just the day-to-day involvement? And then you retired, and did you miss that, or what was it that was a transition?
Yeah, I think just the stimulation of being involved, in a department or an operation, just using your brain and interacting with people on a daily basis. I think all of that, I love that. I like being engaged with people and solving problems and things like that. So for doing that my whole career and just to stop, it's hard, it's kind of hard. So thankfully I have, other things in my life that I still enjoy that help me. And so now I'm just kind of trying to shift gears and do things that I've really never had time to do that I want to do more of, like volunteer work and working out consistently.
Where are you volunteering at?
I volunteer a little bit with the church.
Okay. Which church?
Valley Baptist.
Okay.
Been a member of Valley Baptist.
Yeah, great church.
Wonderful church, wonderful pastors. It's been a great blessing.
Yeah, you got Andrew now.
Andrew, yes.
He does a great job. Andrew's out there doing a great job. Roger and Phil did a great job.
Yes.
And they passed it on to Andrew.
Yes, yeah. They've been a wonderful blessing in my life and in my husband's life. So
that's cool. What area of the church are you volunteering in?
I'm part of what's called the Helps Ministry, and so basically we're the people that help with like prayers. People have prayer requests, or we go and minister sometimes in hospitals when people are sick. We help out with funerals and things like that. So I'm trying to get a little more engaged now. Spending kind of part-time in Florida right now, so it's kind of hard to
You're part-time in Florida?
Yes.
What part of Florida?
St. Augustine.
Okay.
Which, we've been watching the tornado.
I'm saying you're probably in California at the right time.
Yeah,
Stayed away from all that.
Actually, we just came home 2 weeks ago, so we just missed all that. So
I was just over there, a week ago, and for about a week, and so I just escaped. I had planned on going that for a while, But yeah, I was right in Orlando.
Yeah, interesting place. Love it there. It's just,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Floridians are very interesting folks.
They are.
I mean, we were watching some live video of, the Hurricane Ian and the section of downtown, and they're, 100-mile-an-hour winds, and they're walking their dog down
No
the
Yeah.
street.
way.
Yeah, like Floridians, they don't get really excited about it. Usually
Yeah.
they're just...
I have some good friends of mine that are over. I don't know if you know where North Reddington Beach is. It's outside of Tampa, outside of St. Pete's. And we were texting. And I was like, "Are you okay?" They're like, "Oh no, we went down to Miami, and now they're back." And they're like, "Everything's fine." And they just missed where they are. It was like
Yeah.
5 miles away.
Yeah, the hurricanes are for real. They really are. They're no joke, but it's just... You can tell the folks that have been there for a long time.
They
It's
don't
just
even
like,
worry about it.
They just deal with it and go about
Walking their pet
business.
alligator.
You know what's funny, because we were talking to a guy in Georgia today, and he was really interested in how we Californians deal with earthquakes.
Yeah.
But we really don't even give them a second thought.
We don't.
I mean, we'll wake up and go, "Oh, there was a
What was that?
pointer." It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I slept right through it." So it's.
You remember when they used to do you crawl under the desk,
Oh, yeah.
the
I
drills?
did that.
Stop,
Well,
Yeah.
drop, and cover or something
Yeah,
like that.
something like that.
That one about a year and a half ago, I did that in my house because my daughter was home with her friends from college, or one of her tennis teammates, and I go, "Guys, we need to get under the table." Of course, they've all made fun of me since then, but it got pretty. Like you said, the pool was rocking, and
Well, she made fun of you. Which daughter was it though?
Taylor.
Okay, I was one of them. They got in the tub when the thing came, but
Well, you're talking Tessa.
Yeah.
My youngest lives in Tennessee, and so she called us one time, and I was sharing this morning with Mike Van Pelt in Georgia.
hopefully you're not mad at me, Tessa, for calling you out.
But when she would have tornadoes, she would FaceTime us, and you would hear the sirens in the background, and she goes, "I'm in the bathtub with my cat," and she would sometimes show us the storms. I go, "Honey, don't do that. That doesn't help a dad 2,300
Yeah.
miles away."
Right.
You could text me and go, "Hey, we're having a storm," and I'd probably have less anxiety.
Right.
Than I do
Yeah.
now. So it is. So, Shelly, go back to, because I'm always interested in first responders. Was there a desire in your heart when you were young, like coming out of high school, to go into law enforcement? What drew you into law enforcement?
I think originally in grammar school I wanted to be a veterinarian. That was my first goal, but I didn't have the grades and wasn't that good at math and that kind of stuff, so that kind of went to the wayside. But I don't know. I just I can remember being like 10, 11, 12 years old, and I remember one time in the summer I was with some friends at the old water slide. Remember the old water slide?
Over off of Wilson.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I remember finding a wallet in the parking lot, and obviously it had been stolen from somewhere, and I remember just like going into action. I was, convinced I was going to find out, get to the bottom of it, so I was like, investigating, and I think I actually found the vehicle that got broken into, and I ended up finding the owner of the wallet, and they gave me like $20 as a reward or something. But I don't know, I think I've just always been drawn to things that help people, or I don't know. I originally set out wanting to do some sort of casework. Like I thought I wanted to be a probation officer or something like that, and I just thought, well, I'll start throwing some lines out and start testing. And my thought was I'll test for the sheriff's office or BPD or something like that, and get my foot in the door, and then I'll revert over to doing some casework somewhere. So started testing at agencies. Sheriff's office picked me up, and the rest was history. 28 years later,
So I know what it was like when my brother went through the academy. Was Bruce Fissenreiter there when you were going through it?
I was with Bruce. Yeah, he was our.
And did he
PT
run you guys a
person.
lot?
He was a runner.
Wow.
He was a runner. In fact, we had one guy in our academy that was a better runner than him.
No.
And so if the guy in our academy ran faster than him, he would punish the whole class.
So there was a competition.
Yeah.
So were you guys trying to grab him by the shirt and pull him back and stuff? That's what you would do, Mike.
Oh yeah. I might pull him down.
Yeah, that guy was a running fool, and
But Bruce was a wrestling coach up at BC for so many years, and he did the academy for so many years. My brother would always come home and complain. I remember that about the running, and so as you did it, I mean, when you were in the academy, were there a lot of females in the academy, or was that just starting to gear up?
I mean, there were I think there were maybe 3 or 4 other females. I believe I was the only one for the sheriff's office, so at that point in time. So definitely was the minority.
Were they easier on you?
No, I mean everybody was treated the same.
I'm a big proponent for that. You know, I do think, and of course I'm a daughter dad. I have 2.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I really appreciate the fact that, you know, they're getting equal opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, it's funny, I think, and you probably, you're too young, but you can relate to this. As you get older, you reflect on and realize how much God has had his hand on your life.
Yes, Shelly.
I'll give you an example. When I was testing to get into the academy, they have to put you all through these physical tests, like you have to jump over a wall and you have to, you know, push a vehicle in neutral, and then you have to do a 440 run, and I forget what the time limit was.
Shelly, I know you, and I don't see you having a problem doing anything.
Well, that was way back when I used to tell my husband that's when I was a chunky monkey. I was hitting the weights really hard, and I had a little more weight on me, right? So I remember just cruising, and I could remember the person with the stopwatch, and actually my husband was there, you know, watching me. And I remember cruising
but
in.
you weren't married at that
Not
time.
married yet.
Oh, wow.
But I was cruising in, and I remember Henry just yelling at me, going, "You're not gonna make it!" And so I'm just running my heart out, and I failed it. I didn't make the run. So they gave you one more redo. So I got to rest all of maybe 5 minutes, and then they said rerun it.
How many seconds were you off?
I don't remember, but it, you know, obviously it was way under, you know, what it needed to be. So I literally had 5 minutes to catch my breath, and I was never a runner, never a sprinter, and I was a little heavier, and I don't know what happened, but I ran my guts out is what I did, and I don't know how I did it because I can remember my lungs just being on fire, and I just remember just doing all I could, and all I can say is the Lord just like did it, because I literally like fell over when I finished, and I made the run the second time, and that was literally unheard of for somebody to rerun and actually make it the second time.
I love it,
and I always say that was the run of my life, because if I'd not made that run, I never would have been hired.
Now it's interesting that Henry was there. Henry is her current husband. So,
my one and only husband.
Well, one and only.
I was like, was there another one?
No, I meant.
He's your current husband.
He's the one and only.
I met as of today. So maybe that didn't come out right.
He's currently her husband. That's what you meant to say.
Yes, yes. So that's amazing that he was there, and I do believe that Shelly, God does that stuff, and it's sometimes at a point when we don't really recognize Him, but you look backwards and you see that.
Yeah, that was definitely divine intervention, because there's no way physically I should have done that, been able to do that.
So had you had an opportunity to share that before to people?
Really, I don't think so.
Oh, wow.
There might be some close
First
friends
time
of mine that might have known that, but that was the run of my career.
That's
Well,
awesome.
you know what's encouraging about that is the fact that you acknowledge it, because so many people may not acknowledge moments where God does come through.
Yeah.
My brother and I have always acknowledged the fact that we didn't die before we were both believers was anomaly to us, because just some of the things that we would do when we didn't know Christ.
Right. Well, and you know, for me too, I mean, I'm not like a big imposing deputy sheriff. I'm not your typical deputy sheriff. So, you know.
No, you're not, Shelly. You're not your typical.
5'1", you know, 120 pounds or whatever. And the other thing, I mean, the Lord kept me safe during my whole career, because there were times, you know, I used to work out in the McFarland-Delano substation when I was a senior deputy. And I literally would work some mornings, like Sunday mornings, I would be by myself, be the only deputy in that area for like the first 4 or 5 hours of the day. And I used to respond to stuff by myself, you know, people drunk and fighting. Or I can remember climbing through windows to clear a house that had a burglar alarm go off way out in the country where nobody was, no backup, no nothing.
And you weren't scared at all?
Of course I was
Oh,
scared.
man.
I mean, you're lying if you say
So
you're not scared.
how do you deal with those situations, being, you know, someone that's a little smaller and female and stuff?
Well, I think for me, just being true to myself, and that's kind of something I've always kind of felt proud about, is that, you know, I've seen other women in law enforcement that feel like they have to be this other persona to fit in, like act like a man. I've known women that think they got to cuss like the men or go out and drink with the men, or
They got to pretend to
they
be
got to
something they're
act
not.
like they got to be this tough, rough person. And for me, I think just the fact that I always retained my femininity, and I found my strength in just how I carried myself. Because again,
cool.
I'm not this imposing figure. I think if I did get any amount of respect from my coworkers and the people that I dealt with in the communities, it was just the way I carried myself.
Well, Shelly, where'd that come from? Looking back, where did that come from? Is it something learned, or was it something that was observed, or how would you describe that?
Well, I certainly didn't have that type of confidence growing up. I will give, in all sincerity, say I have to attribute it to my husband, Henry, because I think he saw in me what I did not see in myself.
That's so important.
Yeah, and he was my mentor. He was my example, because he excelled in his career, in law enforcement.
He did.
So he always related to the things I was going through. He knew my weaknesses more than anybody did, so he was always able to coach me and mentor me, and he was my example. So I think I just tried to model myself after the way he carried himself in his career.
I always tell, especially younger. I just met with a younger guy yesterday that's going to be getting married very soon, and I've told many people this, but a good spouse, I would say this as a husband, a good wife will make you a much better man. But it sounds like you would say the same about good husband too.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I can attest this about her husband, Henry Castaneda. He is a special man. I do too. I've known all the Castanedas, Bobby, Danny, and Henry, for I know when we were all teenagers, growing up in this town, and I think that they have a very good reputation, and I love the fact that you were able to be mentored in a way that would be able to allow you to be yourself as a high-ranking deputy sheriff coming through the ranks, because I know that's important. I agree with you, because you do get to see a stereotypical female sheriff that would feel like I've got to toe that tough line.
Right. Well, and it's still a male-dominated profession, and I had my trials. I mean, I had a lot of trials growing up, because growing up in the department, I should say, being young, being a female, being small female, and I did. Again, God's hand in it, but I did promote pretty quickly.
I was going to say that. I remember that.
And that in itself was an issue to a lot of the veteran people that didn't think I'd earned my, my promotion. So, I mean, there was adversity. There was, when I was going through field training, I was told that there were other, older officers that were betting that I was going to fail, I wasn't going to make it, and I was going to wash out, and all of that. And then when I got promoted to senior deputy, which is really interesting, usually you promote to senior after you've had patrol experience. Well, I promoted before I had patrol. So I actually went through field training as a senior deputy, and then as soon as I finished that, I went directly to an assignment out of McFarland. And I can remember the first day pulling up there, and you had probably some of the most veteran cops out there at the old substation. I remember pulling up, and the guys just like looking at me like, what is this little whippersnapper gonna show us? And they just, and I've always believed in being humble. I mean, being strong and being, assertive.
You've always been that,
humble.
Shelly. Yeah.
And I remember going to these guys and saying, hey, you know what? I don't know it all. Just because I've promoted doesn't mean I know what I'm doing, and I'm gonna depend on you guys. And so, I made inroads with those guys, and at the end, when I left, 3 years later, they were hugging me and they called me partner, and it was a great experience. And then within, I think it was 3 months of me getting out there as a brand new senior, so I'm still trying to figure out patrol. I'm still trying to figure out how to be senior, which is, senior's virtually you're a detective, so you're going to handle all the major investigations as a senior. So not only that, 3 months into it, the sergeant at that substation, Drew Patrick, was a good man. He went out on a surgery. He had a brain tumor, I believe it was, so he was out. I mean, he was going to be out for a long time. So I remember the commander coming to me and going, Shelly, guess what? Now you're the acting sergeant.
Oh, wow.
So he made me the acting sergeant of the substation.
I can see God's hand in that, too. So Shelly, would you almost attribute the management style you had? coming and appealing to the seniors that are there, may had more time in on the job than you, and just appealing to them like, hey, I can learn from you too, as being what helped you with some of your success?
Absolutely.
That's humility, isn't it?
It is humility, and I think that's, I've been asked in various times throughout my career on interviews, what are your leadership qualities? And that's always in my top 5, humility.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's just as important as ability or, knowledge or leadership. I mean,
well, as much as I know you and your husband form your relationships around Christ, the Bible says pride comes before the fall, but humility comes before exaltation.
Yeah.
And that word exaltation is exalting, which is being raised up. And that's what it sounds like you did, Shelly.
Yeah, and I think for me too, because I was never handed anything. Nothing has ever really been easy. It's just always been a tough field for anybody, but let alone a female. It's an even tougher field. But just the fact that I was able to succeed, it's just, it was a great ride. It was just a great career, and I always promised myself that I would never lose sight of who I was, and never fail to appreciate the people that ultimately ended up reporting to me. Simple things, and it might seem silly, but simple things like, calling a deputy who's got a sick wife. I remember I went one time when I was a sergeant, one of my deputies had a heart attack, and he was a younger guy. I think he was probably in his mid-20s. Well, I didn't even think another thought. I went to the hospital. I remember visiting him and sitting there with his family there. And when I retired, and I hadn't talked to him in probably several years since then, he reminded me, he says, you know what, Chief, call me Chief, says, you were the only one during that time that ever bothered to come visit me when I had that heart attack. And he goes, and I never forgot that. And I always appreciated that you took the time to do that for my family, for me.
Shelly, as I'm sure your responsibility was in hiring younger deputies or promoting them, did you look for that quality too in them? I mean, was it something that because I would think, because I've known a lot of first responders, including sheriffs, and that isn't a trait that usually comes natural, is it?
Not for everybody,
Yeah.
no. And I think even more so, what you seem to, or what I always look for is common sense. Does this person have common sense? You can have a college degree but not have common sense.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think that's kind of a challenge in today's, recruitment field, is you have these younger people that have still at home maybe not even had another job before this. They haven't experienced a whole lot of, 20, 30 years ago, your average 25-year-old has probably had a little more life experience, maybe the military, and done some things, but now they're coming straight from mom and dad's house, and they've never had a job before, and now we're asking them to carry a gun, and it's very challenging. It's a different person today that you're getting.
So in your perspective, and we're in 2022, is the law enforcement profession something that the right people are still coming into? I know we've been through a tough thing with the country and certain things, but I do know that I've talked to a lot of first responders that have started to maybe back away, find another career, that kind of thing. Do you see that there's a hesitation?
My opinion is, I think between social media and the media itself, they've done a very good job of demonizing law enforcement.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
I think maybe it's starting to turn around a little bit now, but they've done a really good job of making law enforcement seem like a really ugly thing to be involved in, and they've made it so incredibly difficult for a person to work in law enforcement. There's so many different mandates, so many different restrictions, and I think that's the reason why sometimes you see officers getting involved in use of force situations. The pendulum has swung so much. There was such a concern with excessive force that now you have officers who legitimately have a right and a need to use force, and they're reluctant to do so. And as a result of that, some of them are getting hurt.
You know, my wife, she's a superintendent of a school district. I say that a lot. But she gets to witness the younger generations coming up. And she's noticed that as you know, she's working it, and I know when she went into the classroom again, because there was a point in her life she just wanted to get out of administration. She chose second grade because there was still a level of respect. And that shocked me because it's 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds that are having a level of respect. And she says you lose that the older they get. So I know that, you know, and I used to have a hard time because my brother's law enforcement. A lot of my friends, you and Henry, are you know, and I would look at these people and I'd go, well, when officer pulls me over, I keep both hands on the steering wheel. Mm-hmm. And they asked me for something. I said, yes, sir, no, sir. I go, that's a level. And I would hear from people, even my wife, that respect level just isn't there anymore. It's almost the fact that I need to talk back, you know, and I need to not comply. You know, it's because it's non-compliance now, where I think in certain areas, especially law enforcement, my brother used to say this, Shelly, and my brother had a heart attack and stroke. And he, you know, I think there was a saying that, you know, after 5 years in the department, the state owns your heart, you know, because it's every time you make a stop for routine or whatever, adrenaline jumps in your system.
Yeah.
And that adrenaline is a drug that you're going up to. And when people comply, it just makes it easier. And if you have to do that 4 or 5 times a day, and I can imagine more than that sometimes.
Well, you combine that, just the high stress job in itself, dealing with unpredictable situations, you combine that with shift work.
Yes.
There's a reason why there's a high divorce rate, alcoholism rate, depression rate with law enforcement, because it is a hard job. And to answer your earlier question, I think law enforcement truly is a calling. It's not a job you can jump into just because you want to get a paycheck. You really have to be successful, I believe. You have to have the heart for it.
Well, I think you're talking about, you know, the way a lot of these younger kids are now. And I've had conversations a lot recently about that. And a lot of it's my generation's fault, right? Because we haven't taught our kids, I'm making a point to do so with my kids, but most of my generation hasn't taught our kids how to have respect for people in general, especially law enforcement. But just in general, there's a general lack of respect out there.
Well, you grow up watching Netflix movies that portray all cops as dirty, and every story you see on the media is some negative story about a cop used excessive force. How often do you hear them talking about the good things that cops are doing?
Well, we make a point in my family, this is just something we do, and if you can learn something from this, hopefully when you're watching, we teach our kids, and you can ask Michael, he's in the other room right now, law enforcement, cops, police, firemen, military, they're the modern day superheroes. They're the real life superheroes. And we make a point, like yes sir, yes ma'am, have a lot of respect for all of you guys and what you do, but that's missing by and large in society.
Well, we have superhero expectations of them, but the bottom line is they're still people.
No, they are.
Still have issues like everybody else. They still make mistakes like everybody else.
But when I say that, I mean the respect level you would give, you know?
You're right. I mean, you know, when I was raised, you know, when a little kid, I mean, I was always raised, you respect people's vehicles and their property, and you respect law enforcement. I mean, but now you got little kids.
Well, again, going back to, it's my generation that are afraid to discipline their kids.
Yeah.
Well,
and not to go off on a tangent on that.
No.
But.
Well, no, but I do think it's important because I can't think of a world where you couldn't dial 911 and expect help.
Right.
You know, and I appreciate that. I remember when my girls first paid taxes and they'd go, hey, what's FICA? You know, I go, well, you can now complain about things.
Yeah.
I go, but you can also be thankful that you can dial 911.
Yeah.
And you can have a firefighter, a police officer, sheriff, paramedic that would be there to help you. You know, and I think that's an advantage. But I think that's a privilege too. And I think as people, you know, do that kind of thing, that you have that ability now to have that service available to you.
Yeah.
And I think as people come to help people, you should be respectful of them helping you. I mean, it's like you say, Shelly, you see so much of the negative side over and over again. And then when you see just a glimpse of something where they, you know, I remember watching a officer playing basketball with the kid, and they just the social media blew up because it's like, wow, that's a great thing, but it's not super special. A lot of officers do that. A lot of people go out of their way to make it, better for people. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, people don't realize how many different hats that law enforcement has to wear. I mean, we've got to go to mental health training. We got to go to, verbal judo, learn how to de-escalate things. We got to learn how to do Narcan now so that we can administer when people are overdosing on opiates. I mean, there's so many different hats that law enforcement is required to learn and to do. And, we have superhero expectations of them.
Yeah. Well, and as you say
challenging.
that, I think that's the side that people don't see. There's like, well, just because they put on a uniform, at the end of the day, they go home to their families just like the rest of us do. And yeah, they deserve the respect of a superhero, but they also deserve the respect of every human being and understanding that they have a family and they have lives outside of that job. Right?
Absolutely.
So we're talking, and Tom's going to nail me if I don't get this one in there, but we talked beforehand. Question we ask every guest: what is something most people don't know about you, Shelly?
Well, my husband would say I'm a gourmet cook.
Ooh, that's fantastic.
I do. I love to cook, and
And
fact,
you found time for that.
Well, in fact, he would tease me about it because sometimes I would come home from work when I was still in uniform or wearing a gun on my hip. I would go straight to the kitchen. I'd be in there cooking up with my gun still on my hip. And he used to laugh about that.
Yeah,
So
that
he's
might
like,
give a husband a second thought to complain about what's being cooked.
Right?
That's good, Shelly.
Yeah.
As you've experienced that, I work with a lot of first responders through 911 at ease. And what advice would you give to a firefighter or a first responder? Because they deal with stuff that normal civilians don't deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you guys move into really tragic, heartbreaking circumstances. I used to tell people this when firefighters would show up at a scene. Some of the job requirements may not leave the scene as good as it was when we got there because we bring water and hammers. And so part of the job was required to comfort people through probably their worst moment in life. And so when you would come home, was it a benefit that as Henry was there, he understood what you went through?
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the challenge for some women in law enforcement. They may not necessarily have a husband that's in law enforcement or somebody who can relate to it. So yeah, he knew exactly the things I was going through. He knew, having experienced a lot of the things, same things. He always had sound advice. He always gave me good direction. So yeah, that was huge for me. And I think the larger thing, and this is the advice I've always given anybody in law enforcement or in life in general, it doesn't have to be just law enforcement, is your life has to be about balance. Balance and proper priorities. Number one, first priority for me is my Savior, Jesus Christ. Then comes my husband, then comes my family, then comes my job.
That's great order,
and,
Shelly.
And the thing is, law enforcement, the way that it is being so stressful and so hard and so difficult, that balance is so important. I mean, for me, going to church and staying in the Word and doing those things is important. Working out, being physically fit has been so important for me and helping me get through a lot of things.
That's something you guys listen to because we're going to be doing a Muscle Matters segment with Shelly too. You guys need to catch that.
Yeah, so I think just having balance in your life, balance of priorities. And the other thing too is you see a lot of brand new law enforcement people, they sleep with their scanner and all their buddies are cops and that's all they hang out with is other cops, and that's dangerous. And I think that's another neat thing that my husband and I have gotten to experience is we've always made a point to travel and to get to know people of all walks of life, not within the realm of, we have teacher friends, we have military friends, we have friends of every walk of life, and I think that adds to the flavor and the variety of life too, and helps you understand people.
Well, I think it's very important, especially in your job, and I think everybody's job, because I love humans. That's what I love about sitting down talking with people, because I like to get to know them. But I think in your profession, having that understanding of maybe somebody of a different thought process, whether it be culture, whether it be race, whether it be nationality, whether it be religion, it's always nice to have a well-rounded, and I love your thought process of being balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Shelly, did you ever, because I know my brother had an experience once, did you ever have an experience where your faith intersected with your job? Like a moment you can remember that, I remember my brother one time, now he's retired too, so he can't get in trouble. He was hooking up a girl from Union, and she was just giving him all kinds of grief, and he put her in the back seat and says, "You need to be quiet because I'm going to pray for you." And she just got quiet. Now, I know this because she came and talked to me at the church about it. She thought maybe it was a new technique that they were employing at the sheriff's department. So she got quiet, but he prayed for her. And my brother's like, that was the only time I did it. I could get in trouble for it, but I just didn't do it. And it turned out where that story kind of progressed through the years. Do you ever have a moment where your faith intersected? I know it probably did every day, but one that stands out in your mind.
You know, right off the top of my head, I can't think of anything specific, but you're right. I mean, I think my faith intersected every day.
Every day.
And I think I saw that more as I promoted and I had more influence over others in the organization. And I think it more had to do with just how I treated people and how I presented to people. And, you know, doing those visits to the hospital or, you know, taking some time out to support another, you know, officer or deputy that was going through something. So I wish I could think of a great story offhand, but it's always just been a common thread.
You will tonight at 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
What is that about it? Well, I do believe, like you said, since your faith was at the top of your mind, you would probably handle that a little differently. And the fact that as you were a senior deputy, you started to, you know, get involved with people's lives, you know, from a personnel standpoint, you know, and I think that's...
well, let me back up a little bit too. I'm not saying my faith has always been my priority because I think I'd be lying to say that. I think most of us would be lying to say that. But as I got older, as I progressed, my faith got stronger. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, it's been a process.
So it's been a process, because I know as people are out there, you know, you're very honest, and I love that, because a lot of us would be lying if we didn't say, I'm hoping to become a better Christian tomorrow than I am today. Was there something, an event or anything that sparked out a desire, or just started to notice it?
Well, I think when Henry and I first got married is when we joined our church, Valley Baptist, and I think that was kind of the first kind of foundation of our faith growing and progressing, and just all the wisdom and learning that we've gotten and received there, I think has been huge. But I did go through breast cancer 2 times, and so I had it, you know, I had it back in, oh gosh, I can't even remember the first year I had it. But the first time I had it, had the full mastectomy, thought everything was good, went about my business. 2 years later, it came back on a lymph node. And it was already, you know, progressed pretty good to where I was going to have to undergo chemotherapy and, you know, see how I reacted. We thought at one point I had something in my lung that we were concerned about, and I just remember, you know, of course, the fear of what could be. This could be it. I could die, you know. And I remember Henry and I sitting at the table and praying together, and you said, you know what, Shelly, you're in the Lord's hands. You're in the Lord's hands, and we just got to trust Him. We got to give it to Him, and, you know. And that gave me an incredible peace despite going through chemo and, you know, all the stuff you go through with cancer. It gave me an incredible peace the entire time I went through that whole process. And thank the Lord I'm, you know, cancer-free today.
That's a great story.
But yeah, and that, I mean, that was, you talk about, I mean, it's the adversity and it's the trials, I think, that draw you to the Lord, or should draw you to the Lord, you know. And as a result, the Lord has blessed me so much going through that experience, where I've been able to minister and talk to other women going through that, or, you know,
kind
be an example. Counsel. Yeah, I mean, I've had opportunities even at work when I was still working. Nobody knew I was going through chemotherapy. I would go to chemo on a Friday, and I'd be laid out for the weekend, and I'd come back to work on Monday.
No,
Nobody knew.
Congratulations
yeah,
to you,
I came
Shelly.
back to work, you know, and maybe this is more insanity, but I came back to work 2 weeks after a mastectomy. I was back at work at the office because, you know, I get in trouble at home lifting pans and doing stuff that I was doing. But just God's the one that gave me that strength, you know, and I lost my hair, you know, I knew it was going to happen at some point. One day I was brushing my hair and it just started falling out in droves, you know, and I got Henry up. I said, "Get up, you're shaving my head."
Did you really?
Yep. So we went out and he had clippers and he shaved my head, and I threw my wig on and went to work.
Wow. That's crazy.
What a
That's cool.
testimony, Shelly.
That's cool.
Well, I mean, I'm not bragging about it. I can only say
I want to brag
the
about
Lord's
it.
strength.
Right?
Yeah. Well, Shelly, and that's the inspiration. And I do believe now, as you look back, I could see God using you, because the Bible says this: I look to and fro for someone's heart who's completely mine that I can support. And I could see you as you're going through cancer. You're sitting there with your husband, and husbands, if you're out there today, you're hearing from a wife, a gal that rose to the top ranks of Kern County Deputy Sheriff, talking about the sincerity of her husband praying with her and the peace it gave her. If you do anything, learn from that. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's a powerful story, because as we do see marriages that aren't succeeding, and we're up to 51%, but when you hear a story like that, and Henry doing the right thing, then even the fact that you can take a moment where your hair's falling out and, you know, shave my head and Henry's jumping in. I can see that, though, of your husband. I really can. Have you joked about that since?
People really joke about it. I mean,
No, I'm just saying shaving your head.
Oh, yeah.
Your husband, he's a jokester.
But you know what? I think
He had jokes around a lot.
So I was sharing this with a younger friend of mine today that's gone through some trials at work, and I said, you know, I think there's always a lesson. There's always something the Lord's trying to teach you when you go through things. Like, as an example, breast cancer. I mean, you know, because you've been in the bodybuilding realm. I mean, working out, looking physically good, and especially for a woman, your hair is your crowning glory, and you want to look good and look nice, and, you know, have a great figure and all of that. All of that was super important to me in my 20s and 30s. And then, boom, breast cancer. What does God take away? All those things that I thought were so important. And it made me humble. And it made me really reevaluate what's important.
It does. God puts us on a kind of blast in those moments. Because you do find some soul-searching moments with those things. I like that. Shelly, is there anything that you would like to leave anybody with that may have a misconception about your profession? Because you've been she's been an amazing guest.
Yeah.
I'm inspired.
I know, right?
That's one of the things we get as sitting here.
I was thinking that as we're going through. I was like, well, this is one of the best ones we've done.
Oh my gosh, that's nice.
Well, but you know what, hearing, and this is why it's important that I think people get a glimpse behind.
Yeah.
Because they see the front.
Right.
You know, and sometimes, you know, it was important for you to show up to work, put a wig on, go to work, get out of surgery, be back at work. And that's the front people see, but they don't know the struggle behind. I used to always talk about the duck syndrome, because, you know, above the water, ducks look like they just glide around, but underneath they're paddling like crazy, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's just life for all the, you know, humans. On top of the water, we're looking great. Beneath, our feet are just moving, and your feet were moving, but you and Henry were moving together.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for Henry to get back. Can't tell you where he's at, but I can't wait to get back, because I want to get him in that seat too.
Yeah.
Because I want to know more about that. I mean, I know about Henry's amazing ability to get big and strong, because he's done that. All the Castaneda's done that. But I just like to know how he got strong inside. So, anything you want to leave the audience with, Shelly?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm nobody special. I'm just
No,
blessed.
you are.
I'm blessed.
Yeah, you are blessed, but you are an example. You are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I would say that, Mike, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Shelly, I'm excited to do Muscle Matters with you, and you'll have to tune into that show, because it'll probably drop a little different than the lunch break.
Yeah.
So I'm putting him on the spot because he's the producer, and he has that. So you want to do some housekeeping?
Yeah. So we just want to say a quick thank you to all the people that help us do this show. Thank you, Shelly, for being here.
Thank you.
You've been, like as Tom said, a wonderful inspiration.
Thank you.
Joanna Connell, Matt White, Alex Howe, Nathaniel Tweed, all of those people, plus Tessa Jimenez and Taylor Touchstone as our creative consultants. And is there anyone we left off of there?
Oh,
It's
okay.
Tessa Touchstone, but it's Tessa Jimenez.
Okay.
Is there anyone we left out?
You.
Oh.
Want to thank MLH Productions for putting on our show, making it possible, because Mike has a heart for it. And around here, our show is based on three things: faith, family, and freedom. And you can go to 511 Media Group.
Yep, dailyfreedom.org.
Yep. And thank you again, Shelly.
Have a great day. God bless.